Hello, One Great Earth. My name is Dan. Sorry about fumbling with my mic as soon as I opened the show. I apologize. Today we're going to cover a bit about wildfires and talk about deforestation. Today is June 27th, and I would like to give a shout out to my headliners, John, Ashley, Michonne, and Sarah. Thank you so much. Ever since YouTube indefinitely suspended my ads account, I created a Patreon account where people can come and they can even sign up for free. That way that I can get a better estimate on my community, get a better estimate on who's watching, and even have people respond not on YouTube but on Patreon would be interesting. I do have a $5 a month subscription as well. While I am doing this YouTube show here, is going to be daily, every day, 5:30 p.m. Eastern. The last couple of weeks I've been streaming, I was going about 2 to 3 streams a day, and that was becoming too much on my community. We're seeing too many updates, and too much content was getting pushed back because of the updates. So, be able to have a more reasonable schedule instead of just going off, going stream whenever I have content available. Conserve it and save it for a whole format block, because I don't think anybody wants to listen to 3 20-minute shows or one 20-minute show, a 40-minute show, and an hour-long show, just all over the place. But now, with this, at least, we'll be able to not annoy people as much that are subscribing, that are looking at notifications, that are getting emails. I'm not sure, but I'm just it's too much. It's too draining for everybody involved. Now, with this, we go to our first story today. Frankfurt man banned from national parks must pay $26,000 for dredging the Platte River. Andrew Blair Howard, 63, of Sparta in Frankfurt, was sentenced to probation in order to pay thousands in restitution for illegally dredging the Platte River. Howard was sentenced to 60 months probation in order to pay back $22,472.22 in total restitution to the National Park Service and U.S. Coast Guard, along with $3,947.71 in costs related to the court proceedings. U.S. Magistrate Judge Ray Kent further banned Mr. Howard as a term of his probation from being on National Park Service property, including Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore. The government did not seek a sentence of imprisonment. He wants in, he wants out. Mr. Howard had a policy dispute with the National Park Service over whether to dredge the Platte River. Reasonable people can disagree on the best course of action, but Congress gave NPS the power to decide. While Mr. Howard had the right to disagree and advocate for his position, he did not have the right to take the law in his own hands and force his favored result. Doing so was a misdemeanor, and the sentence held Mr. Howard accountable for his offenses, said U.S. Attorney Mark Toden. Howard was previously convicted at trial in February 2024 of 2 federal misdemeanors for tampering and vandalism at Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore in connection with August 15, 2022, a version of the Platte River. Pretty sure I'm saying that right, Platte River. In August 2022, National Park Service law enforcement officers investigated reports of a diversion of the Platte River near its mouth where it meets Lake Michigan. Evidence at trial showed that on August 15, 2022, Howard used a shovel to dig sediment and rocks away from river basin and stacked large rocks on a dam to divert the river's natural water flow towards a newly created channel out to Lake Michigan, contrary to a decision by the National Park Service to let the river follow its natural course. After careful consideration of impacts to affected ecosystems and wildlife, the National Park Service concluded that major remediation to restore the area to its natural state was not advisable because the remediation would involve substantial disturbance to the fragile ecosystems of the area. NPS continues to monitor and assess the damage and situation. The diversion was also created and authorized access for large boats to enter Platte Bay. Within days, the natural power of the water in the dam caused a new channel to reach approximately 200 feet wide. Look at this image here. That is just insane. Stacked all the rivers here. Look how small these people are in this image. He did this with a shovel. Did he really do all this with one shovel? He used a shovel to dig sediment and rocks. What? How? How do you dig that much and not die? That's ridiculous. Diverted the lake into the river into the lake. It's very dumb. It's a very dumb environmental crime. What it should be an environmental crime. It should be held to different standards, especially when we think about climate change so much destroying our national parks. This is insane. 200 feet wide. How did he do this with a shovel? Just a shovel. Did he just... I don't even want to speculate because he stacked rocks. Like, this guy sounds like he must have been in shape. 63 years old. 63 years old and he did this with a shovel? How? I kind of want to see video of him doing this. Because, wild. That's real wild. New basin fire forces evacuations near Pine Flat Lake. This is a new fire called the Basin Fire. Started Wednesday just before 10:30 a.m. and has burned over 1,000 acres. Church Flat Campground and the Balch Camp area are currently being evacuated. This comes as multiple crews are also battling the Fresno June lightning complex fire nearby. Animals forced to evacuate from Fresno June lightning complex fire. Fresno County, California. Goats gather at the Fresno Fairgrounds after having to leave their homes due to the June lightning complex fire. You don't want animals to suffer. They are trapped in the path of a wildfire. They are going to suffer immensely, said Mario Reeves, Assistant Agricultural Commissioner for the fairgrounds. Reeves says the fairgrounds is currently housing 24 goats, a llama, horses, a mule, a donkey, and some cows. For some of the foothills, the animals are part of the family. For others, they're a livelihood. So it's important to keep them safe, and for the people, it's just kind of an emotional thing. They love their animals if it's kind of your pet, or it's something that they are making money off of. These people love their animals, said Reeves. Mark Coleman owns a ranch near Highway 180 and Cove Avenue. He says raising animals started as a way to turn a profit and ended up being so much more. Daisy was born on Saturday night. Her mother couldn't accept her, so we had to milk the mother and feed the baby, said Fresno resident Mark Coleman. Then I drove out there Monday night to deliver a new pen for her to see the flames coming down the back of the hill. When the fire scored through the area, they evacuated their miniature donkey, Daisy. She's only days old. She couldn't be exposed to the smoke. Airplanes are flying over, the helicopters are flying over, the hillside is on fire and it's full of smoke. The horses are panicked. They don't know where to go, what to do if they're winning, running it. It's a real scary scene for all the people that have livestock, said Coleman. Daisy is also staying at the family's home in Fresno and being fed bottled milk nearly every 2 hours. Coleman says it's something he never imagined he'd have to do, but it's his job and one he takes seriously for all of his animals. The horses depend on us for feed. They depend on us for water. They depend on us for everything and with that, people love their animals, and with that love is a tremendous obligation, said Coleman. Reeves said typically the first night of the shelter is not as busy. The fairgrounds will stay open as long as needed in order to keep the animals safe. Take a look at California wildfires. A couple of starts here and there. A couple of starts here and there. Mammoth Mountain. That is a wildfire for sure. Massive. Massive plume. Making sure my microphone's working. Sudan's raging civil war. Oh, you know what? I have not had my headline up. Water shortages. We can talk about Sudan later. Sorry, I'm looking. Heat wave in Greece claims more tourist lives. Heat wave related deaths. Record-breaking temperatures in Greece, that's a lot, that's high, have led to deaths of 6 tourists from heat-related incidents. Authorities urge caution as the heat wave continues to pose serious risks. From DW News, Kaki Ali. On Monday, the remains of a German hiker were found on the Greek island of Crete. His body was in a ravine in an inaccessible area near Satoni Beach in the western Chania region. 7-year-old man had been vacationing with his wife on the Mediterranean island when he decided to take a hike from the Amelos Plateau to the fishing village of Sagoya on the southern coast. The trail is about 24.5 kilometers long and normally takes some 8 hours to complete. It's not particularly difficult as long as well prepared and the weather is good. Neither seemed to have been the case in this instance. It's suspected the hiker lost his bearings in the heat and took a wrong turn on the path heading to Tripiti Gorge. The hiker had reportedly called his wife to say he wasn't feeling well. After she didn't hear from him again on Sunday, she reported him as missing, upon which a search and rescue operation was immediately launched. Emergency rescuers and firefighters searched for several hours before locating the man's body with the help of his mobile phone signal. German tourist marks the 6th hiker found dead in Greece this month alone. At least 3 other tourists, a retired U.S. police officer, 59, on the island of Amorgos, and 2 French women, 64 and 73, on the island of Zakinos, are still missing. Record-breaking temperatures. Numbers are unprecedented in Greece. Ordinarily, June is the coolest summer month in the archipelago, which is why so many older tourists prefer to travel there during this time. But this June, the heat has been so extreme that it's said to be the warmest June ever recorded in Greece. On Samos, where one hiker died, temperatures climbed above 40 degrees Celsius. Chania district, where the German hiker died, even recorded 44.5 degrees Celsius. Christos Giannaros, principal investigator at Athens' heat-related health warning system, Heat Alarm, said the victims likely suffer from heat stress due to the unusual high temperatures and the physical exertion of hiking. Age also plays a factor in vulnerability to extreme heat. Older people store heat in their bodies more easily and have a hard time channeling it off. That's why they're more susceptible to symptoms of heat stroke. When suffering a heat stroke, victims tend to lose sense of time as well as their sense of direction, which can put them at greater risk. Most victims also hailed from countries with cooler climates and had rushed into the Mediterranean climate without allowing their bodies time to acclimatize. But doctors say even locals require time to adjust to higher temperatures. Normally, the human body has enough time between spring and summer to gradually grow accustomed to warmer days and nights. But when heat waves arrive so suddenly and forcefully, they can become a public health hazard. Dangerous carelessness. Despite this risk, many tourists often throw caution to the wind, ignoring public warnings and venturing out into the sweltering heat, more often than not ill-prepared. When authorities in Athens recently shut down the Acropolis during the hottest hours of the day to protect visitors, many were outraged. Many hikers also weren't prepared for their treks. Greek media reported that several didn't even know how long or how steep the path was that they had chosen, while others started their trek directly after lunch with a full belly and alcohol in their system under a midday sun. Still others set out alone without bringing their phones. Some of those who did bring in their phones, however, were surprised to find the area they were in did not have coverage. and got lost after being unable to refresh the navigating app on their phone. The death of British doctor and popular BBC television presenter Michael Mosley on June 9 led to a massive outpouring of public sympathy. While vacationing on the Greek island of Symi, the 67-year-old set out alone to walk from St. Nicholas Beach to the nearby village of Petty. When he disappeared, he was only carrying a small bottle of water and was without his phone. Authorities later determined he'd taken a wrong turn and then collapsed in a hard-to-reach area. Police, firefighters, civil protection, and volunteers were involved in an extensive search, engaging the aid of tracking dogs, drones, and even helicopters. In the end, he was found dead near a popular local beach, concealed by a high wall. 2 Israeli hikers who got lost in the Mainalo mountain range in the central Peloponnese did not meet such an unfortunate end. Following a search and rescue operation, they were found far away from their planned destination, but in good health. Hiking is very dangerous right now. It is very hot, especially being older, not being able to get the cooling effect of sweat. You're just baking in the sun for hours. My man tried to take an 8-hour trek just like that. I'm just going to do this. Deaths mount as Pakistan swelters in heat wave. As the temperatures rose in southern Pakistan, so did the body count. The Adi ambulance service says it usually takes about 30 to 40 people to the Karachi city morgue daily. But over the last 6 days, it has collected some 568 bodies, 141 of them on Tuesday alone. It is too early to say exactly what the cause of death was in every case. However, the rising numbers of dead came as temperatures in Karachi soared above 40 degrees Celsius or 104 degrees Fahrenheit, with the high humidity making it feel as hot as 49 degrees Celsius, reports said. People have been heading to hospitals seeking help. Civil Hospital Karachi admitted 267 people with heat stroke between Sunday and Wednesday, said Dr. Imran Sarwar Sheikh, head of the emergency department. 12 of them died. Most of them people who we saw coming into the hospital were in their 60s and 70s, although there were some around 45 and there were even a couple in their 20s. Symptoms including vomiting, diarrhea, and a high fever. Many of those we saw had been working outside, where we've told them to make sure they drink plenty of water and wear light clothes in these high temperatures. The high temperatures, described as a partial heat wave by one meteorologist, began at the weekend. Heat wave centers and camps were set up to try to provide relief to the public. Pictures show children playing in fountains as they tried to cool off. "Look at me, my clothes are totally drenched in sweat," Mohammed Imran told Reuters news agency as he struggles to keep cool on Monday. Not all those who needed help made it to the hospital. Wassam Ahmed knew he wasn't feeling well when he arrived home. The 56-year-old security guard had just finished a 12-hour overnight shift outside. Even then, he had found the temperatures too much. He came through the door and said he can't deal with this hot weather. He asked for a glass of water. Soon after he finished it, he collapsed. By the time Wassam's family got into a hospital, the medics say he already died of a suspected heart attack. He had an existing heart condition, Adnan said, but he hadn't suffered in the heat before. Karachi's struggle to cope with the high temperatures is, some fear, being made worse by regular power cuts, which cut off the fans and air conditioning many rely on to keep cool. Mohammed Amem was among those who was suffering with load shedding, where the electricity supply was cut off, a common practice across Pakistan by the electricity board to try to preserve supply. His relative says their flat experienced consistent, constant power cuts. According to his family, Muhammad was in his 40s, suddenly became very sick, then died. Cause of death has not been established, but his family suspected it was heat-related. According to Dawn newspaper, almost 30 people have been found dead by emergency service on the city's streets. Many are suspected drug addicts. Police surgeon Sumaya Syed told the newspaper. They did not, however, have any signs of injury. Karachi is not the only part of Pakistan that is struggling to cope. Last month, the province of Sindh, of which Karachi is the capital, recorded an almost record-breaking temperature of 52.2 Celsius according to Reuters. Pakistan's neighbors have been suffering from extreme, deadly temperatures in recent weeks as well. Across the border in India, the capital Delhi has been enduring an unprecedented heat wave, with daily temperatures crossing 40 degrees Celsius, 104 degrees Fahrenheit, since May, peaking at nearly 50 C. Doctors in the city say they've never seen anything like it before. For Karachi President Mohammed Zishan, it is clear what the problem is. This is due to climate change, he told Reuters. This is happening all around the world. This is happening in Europe. They have faced intense heat, but they have taken steps about it. But here, it is sad the government has not taken any effective measures. Experts agree these sorts of extreme weather events are becoming more frequent and intense as a result of climate change. The heat wave roasting Karachi is expected to last until next week, albeit with a slightly lower temperatures forecast. Weather experts are now turning their attention to the monsoon season, which is expected to arrive early and bring as much as 60% more rain, according to experts who spoke to Dawn. So the ground's getting baked, getting burned, cooked, and then rain comes. And the rain's going to be monsoon, so it's not going to be able to go into the ground as it normally would be, and you get massive floodings. Pakistan is in a bad shape right here. They are looking at just intense heat. 500 people have died. Over the last 6 days, 568 people died due to extreme heat. Our countries in North Africa, North India, and the Middle East not reporting heat-related deaths properly. Should there be a lot more reported? Because this is big news. 568 people dying of heat-related illness within a week of each other, all within each other of a week. That is brutal heat, very brutal. It's from The Guardian, from Kat Lay, Global Whole Health correspondent. Warnings over lethal and contagious strain of monkeypox as children in DRC die in the Democratic Republic of the Congo in Africa. Alarm over high mortality and miscarriage rates as mutated virus spreads in Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo. A dangerous strain of monkeypox that is killing children and causing miscarriages in the Democratic Republic of the Congo is the most transmissible yet and could spread internationally, scientists have warned. Mpox is a virus from the same family as smallpox and causes flu-like symptoms and pus-filled lesions. All over the scars. Nothing but scars. The outbreak was caused by clade 2 of the virus, one of the 3 recognized groupings of Mpox, and one that has a relatively low death rate. Researchers believe the current outbreak began in a bar used by sex workers. They assumed it would be clade 2 because of the sexual transmission. They haven't genetically tested this to see similarities between the virus found here and there. That would definitely rule it out if they were able to genetically test it and see it is very similar, identical to the other cases that have popped up. He said, countries should make preparations for the spread of the virus. Everyone should get prepared. Everyone should be able to detect the disease as early as possible. But more important, everyone should support the local research and local response so that it doesn't spread. From The Guardian, from Hiromo Abujuli. Whack-a-mole situation. Algerian officials wrestle. Algerian officials wrestle with shortage anger. State not acting fast enough to build desalination stations to deal with dwindling rainfall and resulting drought, says critics. On June 8th, anger over months of water rationing spilled over in the drought-stricken central Algerian town of Tiaret, where balaclava wearing demonstrators barricaded roads and burned tires. Rationing had been introduced to deal with a drought in parts of Algeria and neighboring Morocco, where the amount of rainfall had been historically replenished. Critical reservoirs was much reduced. Taps have been running dry for months, forcing people in the region of semi-arid high desert plateau increasingly plagued by extreme heat to queue to access water. They promised us a solution before Eid, but here we are still struggling to find drinking water. Nadir, a resident of Tiaret, told the New Arab, many people had to postpone the Eid slaughter because of the shortage. News of the protests spread rapidly on social media, but garnered little mainstream coverage in Algeria, where press freedoms are severely restricted. As peak summer season approached in Algeria, total water reserves in its 81 dams are only at a third of capacity. Algeria, the largest country in Africa, is dominated by the Sahara, which covers 3/4 of its territory. For years, it has invested heavily in a climate adaptation, drilling wells for farmers and spending hundreds of millions of pounds on water desalination projects. In March, Tahal Durable, the Minister for Hydraulics, told Parliament that 7 new seawater desalination stations will be built from next year, in addition to 5 currently under construction. This would double the use of desalinated seawater from the current rate of 18% of the total volume of drinking water, said Durable. But some are not in the state. Some say the state is not acting fast enough. There is less and less water for the population across western Algeria, and especially in the steppes and inland plains, which are traditionally pastoral areas, said Andrew Farron, director for Middle East and North Africa at the geopolitical risk consultancy Horizon Engage. That activity now basically cannot happen unless you have a well to get water out from underground. That's not enough rainwater to keep sheep or goats alive without wells. Many in Algeria, the world's fourth largest gas exporter, believe the clamor for a reduction in climate fuel or fossil fuel usage is being forced on them by rich Western industrialized countries that contribute overwhelmingly more to global greenhouse gas emissions than the developing world. Climate crisis activists are, meanwhile, calling for a just distribution of the loss and damage funds agreed upon at global conferences such as COP28 to help places such as Algeria, which are on the front line of the climate crisis. Countries in the global south are in the most vulnerable to climate change, and our leaders must be vocal on climate financing for polluters to pay, said Sarah Ben Abdallah, the Tunis-based MENA campaigner at Greenpeace. After the Tayeret After the Tayeret riots, President Abdelmadjid Tebboune displaced the Interior Minister and Water Resources Minister to fix the situation. After meeting local people, the government fired officials allegedly responsible for misallocating water rations and mobilized trucks to supply the town with water. A long-term solution is also underway. Construction of a water pipeline to Tayeret from a dam about 20 kilometers away. Analysts say more demonstrations could happen in the coming months in Algeria, where there is a long history of protest around local service provision failures. Essentially, what we have seen is part of the mechanism of governance, where the government does a pretty insufficient job in providing services in a lot of domains, and when it gets bad enough, people protest. Then the government dispatches some resources in a very hasty kind of emergency way that temporarily solves the problem. But it's kind of a whack-a-mole situation to go from one place to another, fixing the problems and never looking at the systemic larger picture, which is that Algeria has a water management problem nationwide. Tebboune is expected to stand for a second term in elections in September. Given the state's tight control of the media, it is not known whether the water crisis will affect votes. Unlike in the Sahel, where extreme heat has exacerbated a cost of living crisis, subsidies of power, water, and fuel in Nigeria, Africa's second largest economy, have somewhat softened the impact on citizens. Most of the subsidy payments have come from the purse of Sonatrach, the state-owned oil and gas company which uses profits from deals with foreign companies under a recent hydrocarbons law enacted to draw in more investors. Activists say the arrangement fosters a cycle in which corporations benefit and ordinary people suffer. Algerians are bearing the brunt of climate change impacts, while international oil companies benefit financially from Algeria's oil resources, said Ben Abdallah. Sounds terrible. So many cities like Mexico City as well, like where they have a 0 day coming up for water, where if they don't get rain, if they don't figure out an alternative, city is going to be without water. This Tayeret, Algeria, is a big deal. Also a big deal. Las Vegas businesses impacted by closures due to water shortage. The recent flooding in northern New Mexico's burn scars has effectively shut one town down because they have no clean water. Businesses KRQE News 13 spoke to say they are hurting right now and aren't sure when they can get back to normal. Rain is usually a welcome sight in New Mexico, but after last week, it's leaving northern New Mexico in a serious situation. Flooding along the Hermit's Peaks Calf Canyon fire burn scar has brought ash, silt, and debris from the Gallinas River and Bradner Dam, halting operations at the water treatment plant. So I know this sounds kind of crazy, but we have so much water, but the thing is, our water treatment facility cannot treat the amount of turbidity that is in all of our water sources. Turbidity is the cloudiness of the water. The shutdown, said Las Vegas Mayor David Romero. The shutdown has forced businesses to close until further notice. Pauline Pierre owns Styling Parlor in Las Vegas and has been cutting hair for 50 years. Without fresh water, she cannot operate. I will not be able to open until further notice, and it's scary because I did have people booked as right before the holiday, the 4th of July, and people like to get, dolled up for it. But now, I don't know what's going to happen, said Para. Meanwhile, David Bustos has had his restaurant, Dave's Finer, for just 14 months. This was, I guess, the business that showed me the most opportunity in terms of what I wanted to do all along in my life, which was to open a 50s, 60s diner, said Bustos. Anytime you don't, you lose revenue. It's tough. But the other thing is, the employees, they have to pay rent and mortgages and car payments and so forth. So it's tough on them as well. During an emergency city council meeting on Sunday, the city addressed how serious the situation is. Right now, we have over 3 million gallons of water in those storage tanks. With that, we know the daily consumption. It's typically used with the city, which is around 1.5 million gallons a day. With no clear timeline of when they can reopen, businesses will have to keep waiting. I think that right now is another opportunity for all of us to love one another, to come together as a community, and stick together. In the meantime, some essential businesses have been allowed to remain open, including hospitals, medical services, grocery stores, gas stations, daycare services, feed stores, hardware stores, and government services. The governor released a statement Monday on the situation in Las Vegas. My administration is working with the city of Las Vegas to ensure its water treatment plant is fully operational in the aftermath of damaging floods. We're doing everything in our power to get this problem resolved as quickly as possible. A lot of hardships and pain coming out of Las Vegas due to water shortages. What do we have next? This from
Reuters.
This from Reuters. I think I've said it 3 different ways this stream, and none of them have been correct. Reuters. Texas power demand to break June-July records in heat wave, grid operator says. So let's see, let's scroll down. Okay, here we go. The grid's all-time peak was 85.5 megawatts on August 10th, 2023. On July 3rd, it was 83,111 megawatts. One megawatt can power 800 homes on a normal day, but as few as 250 on a hot summer day in Texas. Texas is looking bleak whenever it comes to their own grid. Texas and California, so many outages, so many problems with power, especially Texas. The Electric Reliability Council of Texas, which operates most of the power grid for 27 million customers, said the system was operating normally with enough supplies available to meet expected demand over the next week. Uh, 100 degrees in Texas. Most of Texas is seeing 100 degrees. You're not just talking about Dallas or Austin. We're talking about entire regions, entire states that are seeing sweltering conditions that we really haven't seen before like this. Especially the Southwest, seeing temperatures over 110 degrees. Did you know there is a temperature that can be reached outside where helicopters can no longer take off? It's about 115, 120 degrees or so. The air is too thin and the helicopters aren't able to take off, so they'll just keep spinning in the rotor blades and just keep spinning without having any lift. So there are a lot of factors that go into search and rescue when you no longer have access to helicopters in these areas in the Southwest and the California region. It's a nightmare. While in the Midwest, it's been mellowing out, but it's still uneasy. Temperatures are just all over the place, but mostly Texas right now is getting hit pretty hard. (107, 106 degrees in North Texas. Most of Texas by tomorrow is going to be 100 degrees. Oklahoma City, Oklahoma itself, Kansas, New Mexico, Arizona is real bad, and I say most of California, especially Southern California, is looking real rough. It's just a quick mention on these wildfires ravaging the Arctic Circle. It's from the European Monitor, EU Monitor. Third time in the past 5 years that high-intensity fires have swept across the region. Yeah, as climate change raises Arctic temperatures, wildfires have shifted north where they burn through boreal forest and tundra, releasing vast amounts of carbon greenhouse gases from carbon-rich organic soils. That's the permafrost. Can't let it out, but it's too late. Won't read the entire article, but there's just another mention that these fires in Russia are still burning in these forests along the Arctic Circle. Not good.
Why not?
As 1 year mark approaches, Maui officials highlight rebuilding after the deadliest U.S. wildfire in more than a century. Lahaina, Hawaii. Nearly a year after wind-whipped flames raced through Kim's Balls, Hawaii community, the empty lot where the house once stood is a symbol of some of the progress being made toward rebuilding after the deadliest U.S. wildfire in more than a century destroyed thousands of homes and killed 102 people in Lahaina. Welcome to the neighborhood, Ball said Wednesday as he greeted a van full of Hawaii reporters invited by Maui County officials to tour certain fire-ravaged sites. The gravel covering lots on this street in Lahaina indicate which properties have been cleared of debris and toxic ash in the months since the August 8, 2023 blaze. On the lots along Komi Mai Street, there are pockets of green poking up through still visible charred vegetation. Speaking over the noise from heavy equipment working across the street, Ball described how he was able to get a building permit quickly, partly because his home was only about 5 years old and his contractor still had the plans. Ball says wants to rebuild the same house from those plans. We may change the color of the paint, he said. Nearby on the Melanie Street, some walls were already up on Gene Milne's property. His is the first to start construction because his previous home was not yet fully completed and had open permits. When he evacuated, he was living in an accessory dwelling, known locally as Awana unit, borrowing the Hawaiian word for family. Anna. I was in complete denial that the fire would ever get to my home. Sure enough, when I came back a couple of days later, it was gone. It's extremely healing, he said, to be on the site and see the walls go up for what will be the new Ohana unit. Using insurance money to rebuild, he's looking forward to that day where I can have a cocktail on the Laini, enjoy Maui, home. The construction underway at Milne's property is a milestone for us, said Maui Major Richard Besson. I think the rest of the community can use this sort of a jumping off point and say, if they can do it, we can do it too. Even though it's been nearly a year, rebuilding Lahaina will be long and complicated. It's unclear when people displaced by the fire will be able to move back and whether they'll be able to afford to do so. The county had approved 23 residential building permits so far and 70 are under review. We're not focused on the speed, we're focused on the safety, Bisson said. Other stops of the tour included work underway at a former outlet mall that had been a popular shopping destination for both tourists and locals, and a beloved giant 151-year-old banyan tree, now drastically greener, with new growth thanks to the preservation efforts of arborists. They cared for the sprawling tree with alfalfa and other nutrients, mainly just water, said Tim Griffin, an arborist who is helping care for the tree along Lahaina's historic Front Street. Trees are going to heal themselves, especially when they're stressed. About to mark the 1 year anniversary of this terrible wildfire. Fueled by climate change, extreme wildfires have doubled in 20 years. The frequency and magnitude of extreme wildfires around the globe has doubled in the past 2 decades due to climate change, according to a study released Monday. The analysis, published in the journal Nature, Ecology, and Evolution, focused on massive blazes that released vast amounts of energy from the volume of organic matter burned. Researchers pointed to the historic Australia fires of 2019 and 2020 as an example of blazes that were unprecedented in their scale and intensity. The 6 most extreme fire years have occurred since 2017, the study found. It's absolutely in keeping with what climate change is doing to fire weather around the world, said lead author Callum Cunningham, a postdoctoral research fellow at the University of Tasmania in Australia. Climate change is making fire weather more extreme and more frequent in a lot of the world. Though previous research found a decrease in the area burned globally by wildfires this century, the new study found that extreme wildfire events have increased 2.2-fold since 2003. Extreme wildfires have severe ecological and societal impacts, leading to deaths and biomass loss while emitting high levels of carbon. According to the study, burn severity, which is a measure of these impacts, has increased in more regions than it has decreased. Cunningham said the research began as response to climate skeptics who challenged whether this is a growing fire crisis if area burned globally is in decline. Despite the uptick in media coverage surrounding wildfires, he said there was not yet scientific literature to demonstrate that extreme events are changing. We've had this paradox where the amount of burning on Earth is declining, and yet we are having fires that are more extreme, more damaging, said Stephen Pine, fire historian and emeritus professor at Arizona State University. How do we reconcile these two? Cunningham and his team analyzed data from orbiting NASA satellites, which collected 4 fire measurements per day over 21 years. The results astounded him. I was expecting to see increases, but the rate of the increases surprised and alarmed me because we're only looking at quite a short period of time. John Abatzoglu, a fire researcher at the University of California at Merced, said the focus on extreme fires is critical because they tend to supersede local fire mitigation efforts. When we have these hot, highly energetic fires, those are sort of fires that are very difficult for fire suppression to have the ability to control and stop, he said. According to the study, as nighttime temperatures increase, wildfire intensity now continues to stay strong through overnight hours. This poses a problem for firefighters who rely on the window for a break in the blaze, retired firefighter and author Bobby Scopa said. This kind of confirms what we've been observing, that the fire intensity is not dying down at night like we used to depend on, said Scopa, who began firefighting in 1974. Rarely did we have a 100,000-acre fires 20 years ago, but now it's not uncommon. University of Colorado at Boulder scientist Jennifer Balk said, firefighters today bear an undue burden with a warming climate and tens of millions of U.S. homes facing wildfire risk. Though the team will continue their research to investigate the scientific phenomenon behind the trajectory, Cunningham said, extreme wildfires have disproportionately increased in certain regions: North America, Australia, Oceania, and the Mediterranean. Researchers especially saw wildfires increase in conifer and boreal forests, which are primarily in North America and Russia. In temperate conifer forests, extreme wildfires have increased 11-fold, accompanied by a 7-fold increase in boreal forests. Climate change is not something off in the future, Cunningham said. It's happening before our very eyes. This is the manifestation of the reshaping of the climate we are doing. This is more regarding wildfires. Canada's 2023 wildfires burned nearly 30,000 square miles of forest, spewed heat-trapping gas into the air. Catastrophic Canadian warming fueled wildfires last year pumped more heat-trapping carbon dioxide into the air than India did by burning fossil fuels, setting ablaze an area of forest larger than West Virginia, new research found. Scientists at the World Resources Institute and the University of Maryland calculated how devastating the impacts of the months-long fire in Canada in 2023 that sullied the air around large parts of the globe. They figured it put 3.28 billion tons of heat-trapping carbon dioxide into the air, according to a study update published in Thursday's Global Change Biology. The update is not peer-reviewed, but the original study was. The fire spewed nearly 4 times the carbon emissions as airplanes do in a year, study authors said. It's about the same amount of carbon dioxide that 647 million cars put in the air in a year, based on U.S. Environmental Protection Agency data. Forests remove a lot of carbon from the atmosphere, and that gets stored in their branches, their trunks, their leaves, and kind of in the ground as well. So when they burn, all the carbon that's stored within them gets released back into the atmosphere. The same is true for ocean trawling, where they put the giant nets with weights and trawl to the bottom of the oceans. That kicks up a lot of carbon dioxide that's been resting on the ocean floor as well. So we're seeing unprecedented amounts of carbon dioxide intrude in our very particular carbon budget, our annual carbon budget. Are we applying these wildfires and other natural disasters, even that huge, hold on, don't want to digress too much, because I already forgot where I was. When and if trees grow back, much of that can be recovered, McCarthy said, adding it definitely does have an impact on the global scale of terms and the amount of emissions that were produced in 2023. McCarthy and colleagues calculated that the forest burned totaled 29,951 square miles, or 77,574 square kilometers, which is 6 times more than the average from 2001 to 2022. The wildfires in Canada made up 27% of global tree cover lost last year. Usually it's closer to 6%, McCarthy's figures show. These are far more than regular forest fires, but researchers focused only on tree cover loss, which is a bigger effect, said study co-author Alexandru Aikavina, a geography professor at the University of Maryland. The loss of that much forest is a very big deal and very worrisome, said Syracuse University geographer and environment professor Jacob Bendix, who wasn't part of the study. Although the forest will eventually grow back and sequester carbon in doing so, that is a process that will take decades at a minimum, so that there is a quite substantial lag between addition of atmospheric carbon due to wildfires and the eventual removal of it, at least some of it, by the regrowing forest. So over the course of those decades, the net impact of the fires and a contribution to climate warming. It's more than just adding to heat-trapping gases and losing forest. There were health consequences as well. Because of these catastrophic fires, air quality in populated areas and cities were affected last year, she said, mentioning New York City's smog-choked summer. More than 200 communities with about 232,000 residents had to be evacuated, according to another not yet published or peer-reviewed study by Canadian forest and fire experts. One of the authors of the Canadian study, fire expert Mike Flanagan at Thompson Rivers University in Kamloops, British Columbia, puts the acreage burned at twice what McCarthy and Kavina said. The 2023 fire season in Canada was an exceptional year in any time period, Flanagan said, who wasn't part of the WRI study, said in an email. I expect for more fire in our future, but years like 2023 will be rare. I really hope so. Flanagan, Bindex, Kavina, and McCarthy all said climate change played a role in Canada's big burn. A warmer world means more fire season, more lightning caused fires, and especially drier wood and brush to catch fire associated with increased temperature, Flanagan wrote. The average May to October temperature in Canada last year was almost 4 degrees, 2.2 degrees Celsius, warmer than normal, his study found. Some of the parts of Canada were 14 to 18 degrees hotter than average in May and June. There's short-term viability within trends, so it's hard to blame one specific year and area burned on climate change, and geographic factors play a role. Still, there is no doubt that climate change is the principal driver of the global increases in wildfire, Bendix said in an email. With the world warming from climate change, the catastrophic years are probably going to be happening more often, and we are going to see those spikier years more often. So the air quality will get worse. The air thins, it gets hotter. Helicopters cannot fly in terrible heat. And the air gets thinned out so much. So thinking about temperatures this year reaching over 100 degrees in some parts of the country. How hot can Canada get for it to see another 2023 year wildfires, where the smoke literally traveled all across the planet? Because there's no such thing as a closed system. When wildfires happen, that pollution goes everywhere. It can go anywhere, I should say. I know it might sound like a lot of doom and gloom, but it's what we're trying to anticipate and brace ourselves for, is for a worse and worse season. Wildfire season throughout Canada, and smoke that just, nothing thrives under smoke. Everything chokes. Everything gets sick under smoke. Breathe, and it takes a shorter amount of time to succumb to smoke than probably expected. If you don't panic, even if you don't panic. Smoke is dangerous and nothing thrives under it. We're going to continue living and moving forward, not expecting the sort of wildfires that we saw last year in Canada. Can't have it again. There'd be nothing left for huge areas by Yellowknife and other regions and Northwest Territories. Because depending on what's in the air, this is Supreme Court blocking an EPA rule to limit air pollution from Midwest states. Washington. The Supreme Court on Thursday blocked an interstate air quality rule issued last year by the Biden administration to limit ozone that comes from power plants and industrial sites in the Midwest and sends polluted air drifting towards the East Coast. So-called Good Neighbor Rule is part of the Clean Air Act, and the Environmental Protection Agency says it ensures that sources of air pollution in upwind states must take steps to reduce it if affecting air quality is downwind states. 12 states, led by Texas, won rulings from U.S. Appeals Court reversing the EPA's determination that its air pollution standards were inadequate. It's a blow into trying to scale down greenhouse gas emissions. This would have been pretty broad across the whole spectrum of industry. You can't operate in the same quantity that it has been, same time. Can't be given back just by putting less in the atmosphere. So much. We are everywhere, and there are factories everywhere pushing out tons of carbon into the atmosphere, as well as massive wildfires burning. It all feels to be too much at times to bear. To think that this next generation coming up before they're 18, they're priced out of everything. School is the most expensive it's ever been. It's alarming, and this next generation deserves to be pissed off, deserves to be upset and angry. Our generation tried, but we were quickly displaced out of areas as power-hungry ghouls served to block all the youth in politics. Not good. Geoengineering foes say no to pouring 60,000 gallons of sodium hydroxide into waters. The geoengineering approach puts Earth's systems at risk in a faulty and false bid together towards solving the climate crisis. It is what we call a false solution. Let's read through this article real quick. 60,000 gallons of sodium hydroxide near as a carbon dioxide removal approach. How would this regulate? Altering the chemical composition of the ocean under the guise of increasing its capacity to absorb carbon dioxide is misleading and dangerous. Why are they dumping 60,000 gallons of this in the ocean to climate change? What would this do? Change the oceans.
Alkalinity.
Changing the ocean's alkalinity. The researchers have no direct ways of measuring how much carbon dioxide will be removed by the experiment. production of the researchers have declined to analyze how much carbon dioxide was released in the production, transportation, and dumping of sodium hydroxide, making it impossible to know whether the technology even reduces greenhouse gas emissions. Ouch. I don't see how this is actually supposed to work. Dump all this into the ocean and it changes alkalinity. To what end? And how do you even prove that is beneficial for affecting climate change? Marine geoengineering does nothing to solve the root causes of the climate crisis and instead puts at risk the ocean's natural capacity to absorb carbon and their role in sustaining life on Earth. Outdoor experiments could not only cause immediate harm to marine life, but are also a slippery slope to potentially catastrophic impacts of large-scale deployment. United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity has placed a moratorium on geoengineering techniques like OAE until there is adequate scientific basis on which to justify such activities and appropriate consideration of the associated risks for the environment and biodiversity and associated social, economic, and cultural impacts. So let's common dreams. Let's stay. Sodium hydroxide, Cape Cod. Let's see, background, let's see. Okay, so the phase 1 and phase 2. Both phases of the study would involve a controlled release of a sodium hydroxide solution, an alkaline liquid, into surface ocean waters and multi-day monitoring of temporary shifts in water chemistry and other environmental changes. From May 30th, so this is from before that they were able to probably put a stop to it. Don't see how it could be beneficial. Highly caustic chemical being put into the ocean could cause a lot of animals harm. We don't know the effects of marine life and these chemicals, which are caustic to carbon life. Know that it's going to be harmful to them in the ocean, especially coral reefs. You don't want to just throw something that's caustic that could eat away at the algae that lives on the coral. Future risk of coral bleaching set to intensify globally, researchers say. From University of Adelaide.
Adelaide.
Adelaide. An international team of researchers led by the University of Adelaide has projected future marine heat waves will cause coral reefs to be at severe risk of bleaching for longer periods than previously seen. This is your ocean's currents. Pretty far northeast they are, but it's not going to continue any further than that. This, we're talking about coral reef bleaching. The red is level 2. Alert level 4 is happening there, east of Brazil. And the Gulf of Mexico is being threatened by bleaching as well, and so is the northeast eastern coast, which has been largely spared from large coral bleaching, is going to be experiencing a significant amount this year, it looks, as the as this heads north. Through climate modeling and supercomputing, the researchers discovered that extended bleaching events may significantly disrupt coral spawning. Starts earlier in the year and lasts longer than previously thought. Yeah. Our validated projections of future coral bleaching risks are based on marine heat wave forecasts, which represent a critical improvement over past approaches. Yeah, the marine heat waves are no joke. Most of the oceans experienced heat waves over last year, as the hottest year on record. On the surface, became the hottest oceans on record. We're going for a 13th hottest month on record. This from The Guardian, Graham Reedfern. Most of it was that scientists discover one of the Great Barrier Reef's worst coral bleaching events. Analysis of high-resolution drone imagery concludes 97% of corals died at a Lizard Island reef between March and June this year. At least 97% of corals in our reef and the Great Barrier Reef's north died during one of the worst coral bleaching events the world's biggest reef systems has ever seen, according to a new analysis. Scientists at several institutions used high-resolution drone imagery to track the bleaching and death of corals on a reef at Lizard Island. It comes as UNESCO urged the federal government to publicly release data as soon as possible on how much coral died last summer's mass bleaching. The analysis is understood to be the first attempt to quantify the extent of coral death over a reef affected by the summer's mass bleaching, the fifth in 8 years, that saw heat stress hit record levels across some of the parts of the globe's the World Heritage listed reef. I was horrified, said Mac. Macquarie University marine biologist Professor Jane Williamson, who worked with colleagues to analyze the mass coral death at Lizard Island North Point Reef. On Tuesday, the Environmental Minister Tanya Plibersek declared a huge win for Australia after UNESCO said it would not recommend the World Heritage Committee put the reef on its list of sites in danger when it meets at the end of July in India. But UNESCO urged the government to improve its climate targets and reduce land clearing, saying the full extent of the damage from this summer's bleaching, including the number of corals that perished, was not yet known. Australia is urged to make mortality rates public as soon as possible. Williamson and colleagues analyzed drone footage taken from the Lizard Island Reef in March, which showed evidence of widespread bleaching and fluorescing, a phenomenon when corals release a spectacular pigment into their flesh as a sign of heat stress. This is coral bleaching to a coral reef is heat stroke in a human being. What we're seeing. Flying a drone over the same section of the reef earlier this month to match the images, Williamson said at least 97% of the corals had died over those 3 months. We were there to do our sea cucumber monitoring work, but there was silence among us 9 researchers. We came out of the water and didn't know what to say. It's an iconic reef and most of it was dead. Professor Karen Joyce of James Cook University said she had been mapping coral for 25 years. It's devastating to say that this year my job became so much easier. In the small area we analyzed, instead of many thousand live corals, I can count for the few remaining on my fingers. Dr. Lyle Vale, director of the Australian Museum's Lizard Island Research Station, said until this summer, the reef at North Point was truly amazing and had recovered from a major bleaching event in 2016. It's pretty heartbreaking to lose all that coral recovery. Coral bleaching is whenever coral reef loses its algae, its food source, and it becomes bone white and dies. In a journal this week, scientists from the Australian Institute of Marine Sciences, James Cook University, and the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority released research showing corals were now getting less time to recover from cyclones, bleaching, and outbreaks of native coral-eating starfish. After looking at the results of coral monitoring trips across 131 reefs over more than 30 years, the scientists found the number of reefs hit by disturbances had gone up from 6% in the 1980s to 44% in the 2010s. The frequency of coral bleaching had increased between 19% and 38% a year, and cyclone damage had also risen slightly, resulting in less time for recovery. Those results confirm that climate change is contributing to ecosystem-wide changes in the ability of coral reefs to recover. The Marine Park Authority said it had given accurate updates throughout the summer, but it would take time to determine the impacts on corals as events play out over many months. A statement said the duration of the environmental conditions and the coral species found on each reef will determine the amount of mortality, survival, and recovery on affected reefs. What we are seeing now is variable across the Great Barrier Reef. Some corals have died from the coral bleaching event, but we are also starting to see recovery, even in areas that were badly bleached. The Australian Institute of Marine Sciences long-term monitoring program will release its annual report on coral reef conditions later this year. Huge numbers, 97% dead. This is extinction. What else are we to do? be able to stop using fossil fuels means most of the world shuts down. But is it worse to think about how the world would be shut down due to temperatures of over 130 degrees Fahrenheit? No helicopter recovery due to the air thinning out. There is a lot at stake when we talk about climate change, because it's all encompassing, it's everywhere, it's all encompassing of nature. And that makes it a very broad topic to be able to discuss. I try to curate news. I try to go through as much as I can to try to make sense of this, of what we're seeing. Because most people don't know the weather or climate outside their own backyard. And that's their own life, whatever. But when you have so much of the world suffering, you have to say that, okay, I'm lucky. It's not 110 degrees outside. Humidity is not terrible. But these extreme swings of temperature changes, especially seeing like Texas, Northeast, and Midwest, especially the Southwest, we're seeing temperatures that should be lethal to a lot of life, especially when you think about how hot the asphalt becomes when it's 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Cause the toe beans of pets burn standing outside. It is a monstrous undertaking. Say climate change is a hoax, because you have to ignore so much of what's going on out there. This is what I do. I curate climate-related news, and I make these videos. And if you're watching and you appreciate what I'm doing here, I do have a Patreon, patreon.com/OneGreatEarth. I would appreciate even if you would just click the free membership, just so I can get an idea of the community. The Patreon link is in the description of this video as well. Let's see, I had at least one more story I believe I had. As chocolate prices skyrocket from decades of deforestation, adopting agroforestry is key. It's been reported that climate change is the reason for record high chocolate prices, but what's received less attention is the root cause of the problem. Chocolate costs more now due to decades of deforestation by the cocoa industry in West Africa, where much of the world's supply is grown, earning it the moniker of cannibal commodity. The good news is that chocolate companies and producer governments can still address the problem. To contain the impacts of past deforestation and promote predictability in production, they must transform all existing monoculture culture to shade-grown or agroforestry cocoa. This post is a commentary. So cocoa used to cost $2,500 a ton, and it reached $10,000 USD per ton. Experts think this is going to remain at least double what it used to be for the next 16 months. So one of the what we're talking about here is the Ivory Coast. We're talking about Côte d'Ivoire. And the forest cover completely, and they have like two major forests left. Major forests left in the Côte d'Ivoire. While the weather anomalies are worsened by global warming, what's actually causing them is largely local deforestation, more specifically the clearing of forests to make way for cocoa plantations. So this is the Como National Forest. This is a Como National Forest, one of the last major forests in Côte d'Ivoire. Cocoa is a cannibal commodity. Its production has killed the forests that have helped it thrive. Now standing in the wreckage of once spectacular tropical jungles, cocoa farms struggle. While working on the NGO Mighty Earth, I broke open a shocking scandal. The Ivory Coast, the world's top cocoa producing country, lost 94% of its forests since 1990. The Ivory Coast is not a rinky-dink footnote for the chocolate industry. It's the top global cocoa producing country in the world. In Ghana, the world's second largest cocoa producer, 80 to 90% of the forests were destroyed in that same time. Roughly a third of the deforestation in both countries was for cocoa. Forests are essentially rain machines. Kill forests and the rains go haywire. Without forests, you lose the rainfall they make possible. You lose forest ability to buffer agricultural systems like cocoa from droughts by keeping soils moist. Air moisture that forests generate also vanishes. Additionally, you lose forest air conditioning effect, which keeps air cool and moist, thereby protecting nearby agricultural systems like cocoa from heat domes. Have you ever walked into a forest and felt a delicious moist coolness caressing your skin? Imagine losing that at an epic scale. Imagine losing 94% of a country's forests. Forests don't only save us when it's hot or dry, they also help when it's overly wet. Acting like giant sponges, they suck up vast quantities of water, thus protecting agricultural systems like cocoa from floods, storms, or unseasonably intense rainy seasons. Largely driven by cocoa, deforestation in West Africa ravaged rain cycles, and we now reap the whirlwind with crop failures. The result is a shrinking cocoa supply, which triggered panic and speculation, including by non-commercial traders and future markets, and then skyrocketing prices. A 10% cocoa shortage resulted in a multiplication of world cocoa prices by a factor of more than 4, and speculation is a common factor in the commodity markets in periods where prices shoot up. But the bottom line is that chocolate costs more now because for decades the cocoa industry obliterated West Africa forest. Unless we change course, the shortages will only get worse and chocolate prices will only increase. The good news is that chocolate companies and producer governments can still address the problem. To do so, they must halt all future cocoa-driven deforestation, an essential critical task now that high prices risk triggering a production boom with impoverished farmers rushing to benefit from high prices by replacing the last remaining forest with cocoa. To contain impacts of past deforestation and promote predictability in production, they must transform all existing monoculture cocoa to shade-grown or agroforestry cocoa. Agroforestry systems weave trees in and around cocoa instead of monocropping where farms consist of a sea of unbroken cocoa. Although agroforestry cocoa will never stabilize rainfall as well as forest, it functions substantially better than a monoculture. If that sounds like a pie-in-the-sky tree hugger fantasy to you, think again. Almost every major chocolate company has begun moving towards agroforestry pilot projects because of recent civil society campaigns. Experts at the Smithsonian, who were hardly frothing at the mouth activists, created a mammoth e-library of all peer-reviewed science on agroforestry cocoa. From that library and from industry pilots, we know how to shift from monocropping to agroforestry. What industry lacks so far is the will to shift, which can then save our chocolate and our planet. It's the only one we've got. And we are running. Oh, I can't believe that. I'm sorry. The world is heating up, and monocrops are helping rainstorms become more brutal. I thank you for tuning in. If you haven't already, please like the stream, subscribe to the channel. It helps me out immensely and keeps me motivated into putting out climate-related videos that you're watching today. I go live every day at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. I'm trying this new schedule and seeing how it works. And so far, I'm liking it. It's a lot of content to get through. And I don't want to have to slow down. I don't want to have to skip days. Because the amount of news that comes out every day, I don't want a backlog of it.
part of the country Great Plains farmers and ranchers.
This from The Guardian. Darna Noor. Lawyers could charge big oil with homicide after 2023 Arizona heat wave. Charges are reasonable after July 2023 extreme weather event, advocates write a new memorandum. Prosecutors in Arizona could reasonably press homicide charges against Big Oil for deaths caused by July 2023 heat wave, lawyers wrote in a new prosecution memorandum. The case for prosecuting fossil fuel companies for climate-related deaths is strong enough to merit the initiation of investigations by state and local prosecutors, the document says. The memo, published by the consumer advocacy nonprofit Public Citizen on Wednesday, concludes that the state could not pursue reckless manslaughter or second-degree murder claims for the extreme weather event that killed hundreds of residents, and which climate scientists found would have been virtually impossible but for the climate crisis caused primarily by the burning of fossil fuels. Victims of the heat wave were diverse, the memo's authors wrote. Right. Some were homeless, like the man who died after breaking both legs jumping over a fence in a desperate attempt to find shade outside an elementary school. Others were well off, like the woman who died in her $1 million home in Scottsdale. The memo says, adding that while some victims were older and had pre-existing health conditions, the authors write, others were young and healthy. The research comes as Arizona and many other U.S. states have broiled under extreme temperatures this month. As Americans reeled from another lethal heat wave last week, it's important to remember that these climate disasters didn't come out of nowhere, said Aaron Rugenberg, Senior Policy Counsel with Public Citizens Climate Program and co-author of the report. They were knowingly caused by fossil fuel companies that chose to inflict this suffering to maintain their profits. 40 cities and states have sued major oil companies in recent years for their role in the climate crisis and in sowing climate doubt. Each of those existing cases is based on civil charges, such as tort law and racketeering sections. Last year, Public Citizen proposed also filing criminal charges, most notably homicide, against the companies. The scheme may seem radical, and experts say filing such litigation would be an uphill battle, but the idea has sparked curiosity among experts and public officials and won support from likely voters. The prosecution memo marks a step towards putting the legal theory into action. Although civil remedies are, of course, vital, sometimes only our criminal laws can measure up to the harm someone has inflicted, said Cindy Cho, former federal prosecutor of over a decade and co-author of the memo. If human-generated climate change is killing people and the organizations that generated knew the risk, then it stands to reason that criminal charges may be exactly what society expects. Though the memo focuses on Arizona specifically, the authors stress that their findings can serve as a starting point for any prosecutor who is seeking justice for climate victims, arguing that memo could inform legal efforts in practically any jurisdiction that has experienced climate-related deaths. In a statement, climate activist and author Bill McKibben said, "What happened to the climate is a crime." After fair warning from scientists about what would happen, Big Oil went right ahead pouring carbon into the atmosphere, and now there's a huge pile of dead bodies. The only question left is whether our legal system will recognize these crimes, he said. And this analysis shows there's a good chance the answer could be yes. Again, if you appreciate what I'm doing here, I do have a Patreon. Membership is free. Using it to garner how much of a community I have. So I would very appreciate it. Even at the minimum, click the link in the description for the Patreon and join even at a free level. I appreciate it very much. I thank you so much. I would like to give shout outs to my headliners. I'd like to say thank you to John, Sarah, Michonne, and Ashley. Thank you very much for being members. I greatly appreciate it. I am trying something new here, a new format, much longer form instead of being breaking apart in 2 to 3 streams per day. I am going live at 5:30 p.m. Eastern with as much news as that I can put forward and try to connect some of these climate dots, because it takes a long time to understand what is happening right now. We are going through it every day. We are going through some of the most breaking climate news. Speaking of climate-related news, Rapidan Dam growing erosion continues.
River has been eating away at the bank around the Rapidan Dam now all week long. It breached the side of that dam just the other day, and we saw the erosion continue to grow when that was happening as well. I want to show you these satellite images. These are really stark contrast to what exactly happened in the last week. This video and this view of that area was taken on September 6, 2011, okay? You can see this is the whole area of the dam right here that has been washed away. From here all the way to here. The house sat right in here. This is that tree line that we saw erode. The house sat in here is kind of shaded. But what's gone now is all this through here, all the way up to here, all the way up to here, like that. That's gone. You can see it very clearly here in this image taken on June 26, just days ago. All that is gone. This is that parking lot. The house is gone. Everything is gone. The pole shed, everything is gone. This is where all that erosion took place. It is a massive amount of land and property and trees that are now gone. The river kept eroding. The water rushes around the edge. The main concern no longer that dam, though. It's the bridge that the officials are now turning their attention to. Our Rob Olson has the very latest on that concern.
Pretty devastating. A lot of history there.
With each day comes continued amazement at how much more land is carved away.
I can't believe how much bank is gone.
The canyon created by the Blue Earth River around the Rapidan Dam, now about as wide as the dam it bypassed, a favorite landscape forever changed, if not lost.
Just nice to come out here and stand on top of the dam, just feel like you were in not Minnesota.
This is how the dam and the land around it looked before the floods, and this is how it looked a couple of days ago. So much lost so quickly, and now it's gotten so much wider yet. The water level's down dramatically because the erosion's so extensive, exposing the bottoms of the supports under the ridge next to the dam, which is a huge concern. That's why no one's now allowed on the bridge, not the first responders, not even engineers, who've been using it to drop gauges into the river.
The park is now gone. It's been,
I want park back.
He wants the park back.
At the base of the ridge, what was a city park is now just another void in the earth. The playground already went into the river. Crews removed the park pavilion now to avoid adding even more debris to the floodwaters. A couple of days ago, that pavilion was a good 50 yards from the edge.
And it's hard to fathom, too. Like, the last time I was at the dam store, I didn't think this is the last time I'm going to be here. This is the last time I'm going to stand on the dam. The last time we're going to have the kids run around at the park. You don't think like that.
Now that edge creeps ever closer to the historic dam store after claiming the family's home Tuesday night. The ground is too unstable to do anything to try to save the store itself, but behind it, crews removed an old mobile home just in case it gets that far. Hopes remain the store survives, but that's far from certain.
And the store, unfortunate. Had a lot of good pie there. It was a great place to go.
And now all afternoon, more rain, which adds to the concern not only about the floodwaters, but about all that moisture in the soil, just again increasing its instability as they're hoping this erosion stop. At Rapidan, Rob Olson, Fox 9.
Took that bridge out. That rail bridge. This is satellite imagery of the Rapidan Dam and the erosion on the west side of the dam. That bridge is in danger. Massive.
Flooded Blue Earth River has been eating away at the bank around the Rapidan Dam now all week long. It breached the side of that dam just the other day, and we saw the erosion continue to grow when that was happening as well. I want to show you these satellite images. These are really stark contrast to what exactly happened in the last week. This video and this view of that area was taken on September 6, 2011, okay? You can see this is the whole area of the dam right here that has been washed away. From here all the way to here. The house sat right in here. This is that tree line that we saw a road. The house sat in here is kind of shaded, but what's gone now is all this through here, all the way up to here, all the way up to here, like that. That's gone. You can see it very clearly here in this image taken on June 26, just a few days ago. All that is gone. This is that parking lot. The house is gone. Everything is gone. The pole shed, everything is gone. This is where all that erosion took place. It is a massive amount of land and property and trees that are now gone. The river kept eroding. The water
Absurd. That's why no one's now. A couple of days ago, that pavilion was a good 50 yards from the edge.
And it's hard to fathom too. Like the last time I was at the dam store, I didn't think this is the last time I'm gonna.
Increasing its instability as they're hoping this erosion stop. At Rapidan, Rob Olson, Fox 9.
All right, Rob, thank you. And further to the south, the Des Moines River is taking over the small town of Windham. Take a look at Skyfox here. This is shot just today. You can see how that river and that area is now consuming parts of that small town. People are sandbagging around their homes. The river is just taking over areas, the ball field down there that clearly was dry land just a few days ago. The highway making its way through there, but this is also an area of concern as well. Several highways, in fact, were taken over by water. They're closed because of the floodwaters. The good news is that water down here is now receding. In St. Paul, though, parts of Harriet Island are underwater as the Mississippi River there remains a major flood stage. According to the latest forecast by the National Weather Service, the river is expected to crest just under 21 feet this weekend. They're also projecting the river will recede below 17 and into moderate flood stage around July 2nd or 3rd.
Pretty terrible. What's going on in the Rapidan Dam in southern Minnesota? I have so much more to get into because there is so much that's going on, but what are you going to do? I thank you for your time. I thank you for watching, for watching this stream. This is a new way I'm taking it. It's going to a more longer form than updating multiple times a week. Instead, trying to get through as much as we can, because it's usually a lot. And it never feels like it's a lot until I'm getting into it. And then I realize it's already been an hour and I'm still talking about the same story. So much is happening. But what are we going to do? What will we do? With massive amounts of climate change happening all around the planet, what are we going to do? What should we be doing? Stop driving cars? Stop having forest fires? Stop dredging the oceans floors? What are we going to do? There's no way to have people agree. People can't agree on anything. Because if it hurts their bottom line, that's all that matters. Then we're seeing shocking amounts of failures, of climate failures. And what are we going to do when this becomes more widespread? We're seeing more soil erosion happening, more earthen dams failing. Okay, I think I'm going to call the stream here. I thank you very much for your time. I will be back tomorrow at the same time, 5:30 p.m. Eastern. I am trying to lean into this slot because it's in between podcasts that I normally listen to. So trying to squeeze into content of my own that I want to listen to. Thank you very much. Please take care. I will see you again.